Other interesting thing that's happened, and I'm going to give credit to County Highway. It's a print-only publication, $8.50 per issue. It gets mailed to you. Walter Kern, I think one of the editors or sponsors of it. It's an old-fashioned newspaper, but it's kind of magazine-type articles. If I get enough people subscribing to this, I'll subscribe to that. That's probably going to be the first thing once I start getting people on my Substack, hoystory.substack.com. I'm just going to pass the money to other creators so I can read what they write. How fraud swamped Minnesota's social services system on Tim Walz's watch. New York Times article comes out after the election. We're going to point out to you that there's plenty of evidence that a lot of this was known before the election. No one was interested in paying attention. Not Kamala Harris, not the mainstream media. Surprise, surprise. This is the New York Times article, reporting from Minneapolis. Fraud scandal that rattled Minnesota was staggering in its scale and brazenness. Federal prosecutors charged dozens of people with felonies, accusing them of stealing hundreds of millions of dollars from a government program meant to keep children fed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the last 5 years, law enforcement officials say fraud took root in pockets of Minnesota's Somali diaspora. 59 people convicted so far. More than $1 billion in taxpayer monies has been stolen in the plots they're investigating. That's more than they spend on prisons in Minnesota. Guess what? They don't spend enough on prisons in Minnesota. Governor Tim, and these are the first 6 articles of the piece. Fraud scandal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 6th paragraph, we get Governor Tim Walz and fellow Democrats are being asked to explain how so much money was stolen on their watch, providing Republicans who hope to take back the governor's office in 2026 with a powerful line of attack. 6 paragraphs in, Republicans pounce. It's predictable. In 2020, Minnesota Department of Education officials began raising questions about the plausibility of some invoices. You're feeding how many people every day? And then here we go. Feeding Our Future, the nonprofit group that was the largest provider in the pandemic program, and fraudulent, responded with a warning. In an email, the group told the state agency that failing to promptly approve new applicants from minority-owned businesses would result in a lawsuit featuring accusations of racism that would be sprawled across the news. And the media would have lapped it up. They would have repeated that stuff unquestionably. Oh, the government's being racist, just like the 1960s in 2020 Minnesota. I don't think so. No, that's not credible, but media would have lapped it up. It would have worked. A report by Minnesota's nonpartisan Office of the Legislative Auditor about the lapses that enabled the meals fraud later found that the threat of litigation and of negative press affected how state officials use their regulatory power. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes the government misbehaves and the media shining a spotlight on it's a good thing. Flip back to those Ammo Land articles about the ATF. More attention on that would be a good thing. But when you're using that to hide your fraud and the government, people who are supposed to be investigating that are so chastened and fearful about it that they don't do their job, that's a problem. Mr. Walz is seeking a 3rd term next year. He's created a task force. And here we go. Money quote, people. The message here in Minnesota, Mr. Walz says, is if you commit a crime, if you commit fraud against public dollars, you are going to go to prison. That's my best kind of Eddie Murphy laugh impression. That may be Horshack. I'm not sure. It's one of the two. Why do I laugh? I laugh because Hennepin County judge tosses out jury's guilty verdict in $7.2 million home health care fraud case. Jurors tell KARE 11 News their decision wasn't difficult after seeing the evidence of obvious fraud committed by Abtifa Yusuf. Minnesota judge under scrutiny for overturning a $7.2 million fraud conviction, and a couple who were found guilty of misappropriating Medicaid funds to support their lavish lifestyle of fancy cars and designer duds. Charged in June 2024, found guilty in August 2025 after he and his wife were accused of stealing millions from Minnesota's Medicaid program while running a healthcare business out of their home. Yusuf was found guilty of 6 counts of aiding and abetting theft by swindle by a jury, but Judge Sarah West overturned the conviction. Why? Well, apparently she thought there's another explanation. Maybe they didn't do it. She needs to be impeached and removed, or however they do it in Minnesota. She needs to be off the bench. We need to do more of that, by the way. Judges who show poor judgment shouldn't be on the bench. Jurors from the case can't believe the decision. I'm shocked based off all the evidence that was presented to us and the obvious guilt we saw based off of the said evidence. We didn't take our job lightly. We went through a lot of evidence and discussed a lot, took our time, but we all came to an agreement pretty easily. Minor shocker is Attorney General Keith Ellison, formerly, I think he was head of the DNC, filed an appeal on Monday. That would have been yesterday. Prosecutors are rarely able to appeal an acquittal, but they can in this case since the judgment overturns the will of the jury. Here's hoping, but if that happens in one case in Minnesota, well, I wouldn't try another one of these cases before that same judge. And maybe Tim Walz's promise is ephemeral. Maybe there's not much to it. Getting back to what was known when, this is a Twitter account. They had posted something to Kamala Harris back when she picked Tim Walz, saying, hey, we got a fraud problem here in Minnesota. Not a good idea to pick this guy. Tim Walz is 100% responsible for massive fraud in Minnesota. We let Tim Walz know to fraud early on, hoping for a partnership in stopping fraud, but no, we got the opposite response. Tim Walz systematically retaliated against whistleblowers using monitoring, threats, repression, and did his best to discredit fraud reports. Instead of partnership, we got the full weight of retaliation by Tim Walz, certain DFL members, and an indifferent mainstream media. It's scary, isolating, and left us wondering who we can turn to. In addition to retaliating against whistleblowers, Tim Walz disempowered the Office of Legislative Auditor, allowing agencies to disregard their audit findings and guidance. Media and politicians supporting Tim Walz or the DFL agenda attacked whistleblowers who were trying to raise red flags on fraudulent activities. There's more. Link to this full post will be in the show notes down below. I think Jim Garrity, this isn't in the slide deck, but I read it this morning. Jim Garrity was on he's a National Review columnist. His morning report found that apparently there's the actual office of the governor is a mess. He can't even run his office right. People weren't signing timesheets. They didn't know where money was going out. They didn't know when they were owed money. They didn't know when they had to pay money. So he can't run his own office, let alone the state. The worst part of it, though, this comes from City Journal. So the Somali community, of whom squad member Ilhan Omar, I married my brother to help him get into the country, representative is from. A lot of this fraud, again, because they said they were going to, accuse you of racism if you don't give us the money, is the Somali community in Minnesota. Like many, I'll say many, it's not uncommon for these sorts of communities to send money to the poor families back home. Well, they were doing that too. And where was that money finding its way to? From City Journal. What happened to all that money? Somali fraud rings have sent huge sums in remittances or money transfers from Minnesota to Somalia. According to reports, an estimated 40% of households in Somalia get remittances from abroad. In 2023 alone, the Somali diaspora sent back $1.7 billion, more than the Somali government's budget for that year. Our investigation reveals for the first time that some of this money has been directed to an even more troubling destination, the al-Qaeda-linked Islamic terror group al-Shabaab. According to multiple law enforcement sources, Minnesota's Somali community has spent untold millions through a network of hawalas, informal clan-based money traders, that have wound up in the coffers of al-Shabaab. I'm not sure how we put those funders in jail, but we need to. The fact that Minnesota taxpayers are a major source of money for an Islamic terror group is a problem. It'd be not. Trump's saying, "Oh, we're going to stop people from coming from Somalia anymore." Well, that should have happened a long time ago. We need to have a serious discussion in this country about who we're letting in, and we need to do a heck of a lot better at assimilation, because you shouldn't have this. We should not be have large communities where they're sending taxpayer dollars obtained through widespread fraud to terrorists. Something needs to be done. Maybe what Trump's doing on this is a good first step, but we need to be serious about this stuff. Ilhan Omar shouldn't be in Congress. She shouldn't be in America. She should lose her naturalization, because she did commit immigration fraud by marrying her brother. She's never, there's plenty of evidence she did that, and her rebuttals to that are usually, "You're a racist for saying that," which is not a rebuttal to the charge. Thanks for watching this clip from the Hoystory On Air broadcast.